Time travelers, gather close. Stop. Just look at this face. Does that look like a king to you? Or does it look like a genetic accident just waiting to happen? Most empires, they fall to swords, fire, or revolution. But the House of Habsburg? They didn't fall to enemies. No, they fell to their own jaws. We're talking about a dynasty that literally owned the world, the Holy Roman Empire, Spain, the Americas. They were viewed as gods on earth, right? But there was a secret, a dark obsession that turned their bloodline into a death trap. See that protrusion? That's the Habsburg Jaw. At the time, they thought it was a sign of divine purity. They were wrong. It was the mark of a collapsing genome. I mean, they were marrying their own siblings and nieces just to keep the crown, thinking they were perfecting their bloodline. Instead, they were weaponizing their own DNA. By the end, they were so broken, so deformed by inbreeding, that one heir couldn't even chew his own food. You think you know how their story ends? You don't. Because the final descendant wasn't just a king, he was a medical impossibility. Want to see how the most powerful family in history literally dissolved into thin air? Keep watching, because this gets disturbing. Hello, time travelers. Stop. Forget the romantic fairy tales you were fed in school. The Habsburgs weren't just royalty. They were the original corporate raiders of the 16th century. I mean, for them, a wedding wasn't a union of souls. It was a hostile takeover. Why bleed out on a muddy battlefield when you can simply inherit the deed to your enemy's kingdom? You see, they didn't want allies. They wanted a global monopoly. Look at the map. Spain, Austria, the Netherlands, the New World. It wasn't Europe anymore. It was one giant, private vault. But then, the obsession kicked in. They actually started believing their blood was literally divine. To keep it pure, they turned inward. What started as a calculated power grab turned into a biological suicide pact. They thought they were building a fortress for their empire, but, in reality, they were constructing a genetic prison. And the cost? A ticking time bomb hidden behind silk curtains. You think you know how their bloodline ended? Trust me, you're not ready for what they really did to keep their divine status from rotting away. Hello, time travelers. Stop. Look at this portrait. That chin isn't just a fashion statement. It's a biological death warrant. You see, the Habsburg family didn't just rule Europe. They turned their own bloodline into a closed-circuit suicide mission. Imagine a family so obsessed with divine blood that they refused to marry anyone outside their own gene pool for centuries. I mean, uncle marrying niece? That was just standard practice, right? First cousins? That was the baseline. They weren't building a dynasty. They were shrinking their DNA until it snapped. Historians call it purity. Biology calls it a nightmare. By the 17th century, the Habsburg Jaw became the ultimate status symbol, but it was really just a mask for a decaying reality. Infants dying in the nursery, heirs unable to walk, a dynasty rotting from the inside out. They thought they were chosen by God, but they were actually victims of their own arrogance. But here's the kicker. The physical decay was only half the story. Something happened in the final generation. A secret so devastating it didn't just ruin a family, it shattered an empire. What happens when the last living heir is born and realizes his own body is his prison? You won't believe the final diagnosis of the man who ended it all. Hello, time travelers. Stop. Just look at this portrait for a second. This isn't just some old, dusty painting. It's a biological crime scene. You see, this is King Charles II of Spain, the final tragic act of a dynasty that once ruled the entire world. But how exactly did the most powerful bloodline on earth end up as a man who, honestly, couldn't even chew his own food? You know, by 1661, the Habsburgs were becoming absolutely obsessed with this idea of purity. So, they kept it in the family. Again. And again. And the result? A genetic dead end they cruelly called the Bewitched. His jaw was so deformed that his tongue barely fit in his mouth. He was, in every sense, a prisoner of his own DNA. But wait, that's not even the craziest part. While he sat on the throne, literally unable to speak or walk, the greatest powers in Europe weren't just watching him die, right? No, they were circling like vultures. The empire was a headless giant, and everyone knew it. Behind these gold-leafed doors, while the king suffered, secret documents were moving in the shadows. Powerful men were playing a game of chess, and the headless king was the only thing standing between Europe and a total blood-soaked collapse. You're probably thinking, how on earth does a man who can't even feed himself hold the world's most powerful empires at bay for 35 years? Well, the answer hides deep in the dark archives of Madrid, a truth so cold it changed history forever. Keep watching, because what happened in his final gasping moments wasn't just a death. It was the starting pistol for a global war that would reshape the map of the world. Greetings, time travelers. The Habsburgs didn't fall to invading armies. No, you see, they fell to a nursery. Imagine ruling the entire world, only to have your own bloodline betray you. Meet Charles II, the human face of a genetic catastrophe. After centuries of strategic marriages to keep the crown firmly in the family, the Habsburgs pulled off a trick no one saw coming. They accidentally deleted themselves. They actually thought they were building a divine empire. But in reality, they were building a biological dead end. But here is the real kicker. The higher they climbed, the faster they cracked. And it wasn't just those infamous physical deformities, right? It was the sheer arrogance of their isolation. Nature has a way of balancing the scales. And I mean, let's be honest, biology simply doesn't care about your royal blood. But wait, I need you to look a bit closer. Are we actually any different? Today's elite corridors are echoing with the exact same patterns of insulation and elitism. Are we building our own version of a biological trap? Or are we just repeating the same blind spots that brought an entire empire to its knees? Before I drop the evidence on who else might be falling into this trap, I want to know, do you think our modern systems are just as fragile? Tell me your theory in the comments. I'm reading every single one. You want to see the cracks in the system that the textbooks are hiding? Hit that subscribe button. Join Signal Age. We're just getting started.